Welcome to you our freshly started İTÜ Faculty of Architecture lecture series, or as we call architalkture. We have designed this lecture series to enrich our intercultural atmosphere in our faculty. We believe that the speakers we invite will make an invaluable contribution to our already rich and vibrant co-curricular activities. And not only the students and the faculties, but also wider architectural community in Istanbul would like to have and to listen to this lecture, which will be delivered in this architalkture lecture series. It's our great pleasure to have our distinguished guest, Mr. Chris Precht, a founding partner of PENDA, as our first speaker in this lecture series, Architalkture. Mr. Precht's talk is titled "The Next 1/10 of a Second." Is concerned with the challenges and responsibilities of modern designers in the 21st century, especially the differences between the difficulties we have to deal with in our times and the conflicts of the designers of the preceding eras, the differences between the difficulties we have to deal with. I would like to welcome you all again to this lecture series and express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Precht for his talk, which I believe will be quite inspiring for all of us. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the Architalk series of ITU. We are really pleased to have Chris Precht tonight with us, among us actually. I will give a very short introduction about Chris, because I'm quite sure that most of you are already familiar with his work and with his studies as well. Chris is a graduate of University of Innsbruck from Austria. He is, as he calls himself, Millennium Architect, that we already discussed a couple of minutes ago. And I was quite inspired when I was reading Chris' curriculum vitae, because I saw that it was out of the standard curriculum vitae that I had really faced before. And after giving a couple of points about his work and his achievements, I would like to finish my words with his wording from his curriculum vitae, which I think that he will be quite inspiring and provocative for all of you, because I believe that he will also talk about his ideas that he spoke in his curriculum. Chris, as I mentioned, that it's a graduate of Austria Innsbruck University. Then he has a master's degree of Vienna Technical University. In between time, he worked in Zaha Hadid office and Ketil Thorsen as a lecturer. He founded his studio in his wife Faye in 2013. And since then, it has been past only 5 years, but he has a great achievements with his many awards that I'm not going to really list all these awards here, but I will just mention that based on the years, in 2015 they won 5 international awards. In 2016, 11 international awards, and I'm really curious how the speed of your work and production for 2016 with 11 awards. Then in 2017 they had 2 international awards, and in 2018 3 international awards. He has also really participated with his office in many competitions and got many first prizes, and was elected as a finalist, and has practiced since 2013 in many countries in this until 2016, from China, Italy to Pakistan and Malaysia. This is a very short bio and achievement list of the Chris Precht, but more you can find in his website as well. Before I finishing my words and welcoming Chris to the stage, I would just want to read a couple of sentences of his curriculum vitae. We are a young office, and we take the pride to be part of the new generation of architects that speak up with a fresh voice. We believe this voice is important for all the challenges of our time. Older generations had their chance. It's now on us, young creatives worldwide, to change course and create the future we want to live in. We also see it as a responsibility to inspire our young creatives. We believe that the era of the ego and the star architects is over, and architecture enters an age of collaboration. Collaborations between architects and collaboration between industries. So these are his own words, and we are now welcome Chris to the stage to give us more broader explanation of his ideas and works. Thank you for being with us, Chris.
Hello, everybody. To these awards, I just want to mention that it seemed like the awards just got less and less over the years. I think I just got more and more tired to participate in awards. I think in architecture there's awards you can win very, very easily. You pay a little bit of an entrance fee, you have a good project, and then you win an award. But actually that doesn't mean a good achievement, or that you're a good architect, or that somehow this defines your work. I said one time that actually I think you win as an architect an award just for one reason, to make your mom proud. That your mom that your mom has a reason that she can brag to her friends about you. I think that's the only reason you win awards. So thank you for having me today. Thank you to the ITU for inviting me. Also thank you to you guys that you came out. It really amazes me every time that there is a flyer hanging on the door and you guys are marking a day in your calendar, and then you leave your homes and come out to hear me speak. I'm really thankful for that. And I was a student not so long ago, and I heard my lectures, and I'm not sure if I would have come out. So I'm really, really grateful for you to show up tonight. So my lecture today is about the future. It is about young architects, about you guys, about me, about our generation, about our task of our generation. I really like to especially talk to students because A, I still feel a little bit like a student by myself, and B, I think there is something very different between young architects or students and the older generation of architects. And the difference is that all of us, we still have our future and our best ideas and our best work still ahead of us. And that is something very exciting to look forward to. And on the other hand, I also know still the struggles that come with being a young architect, being constantly anxious, being afraid that you're not good enough, also to somehow not seeing your place in this architectural system. But all of those things, actually, these are all good things. It's good to be that you don't feel part of an architectural system because the architectural system is flawed. It's also good that you feel you're constantly not good enough. I have never met a creative person in my whole life who thought that his creativity is enough. And it's also good to be anxious, to be overwhelmed of certain things, because architecture is very personal. The architecture is shaped by your personal stories, by your personality. And if you feel anxious, that just means that you share your projects, your personality with the world, and you are afraid that maybe the world doesn't like it. But being anxious means that you care about architecture and that you care about projects. So all of those things are actually good parts. So for that reason, I really like to talk to our generations about our challenges and our tasks and about our responsibilities we have when we head into the future. Let me go one back. So I start with the most boring part of the lecture, introducing myself. So I'm Chris, I'm an architect from Austria, and I just turned 5 years old as an architect. And as an architectural toddler, I started now to learn how to stand on my own feet. I started how to form my own architectural language in a way. But I still, I just talked with Enrique about this, have this, this necessary naivety to take on projects I probably would not take on if I would be an old architect already. This naivety to ask not necessarily what is profitable when we have a new project, but what is possible. So we are still in this stage where we explore, where we learn, and where we experiment with a lot of things. So this is how I grew up as a real kid, as a real toddler. I grew up in the mountains of Austria. My father, he was a carpenter, and he built me this Ferrari. Actually, I drove faster than 100 kilometers per hour with this Ferrari and accidentally killed 2 chickens. But this is also a pretty good statement about architecture. You see that before I was an architect, I had a Ferrari and I had a full head of hair. Now I'm an architect, I don't have a Ferrari anymore and my hair is gone as well. As a kid, we also ask a lot of questions. And I think that is a very important part our generation needs to do. Because I somehow have the feeling that the architects who are now in their puberty, they are very concerned with themselves. And the older architects, they mostly stopped asking questions because they know already how the system is running. But our task as a young generation of architects is to ask a lot of questions. To question the status quo, also to question our industry of architecture, our building industry, if it really needs to be that way it is, and maybe if we ask a lot of questions, we also can find some alternative answers of how our generation can make it maybe better in the future. So some of our questions are that at the moment our cities grow 1.5 million people per week. It is estimated that by 2050, 10 billion people will live on our planet. 75% will live in cities. So that is pretty good news for architects because, well, it means we have to build a lot. But I have to ask the question, is this also really good for other people? Is this also good for other species, for other animals? Is it also good for our environment? Although we have a lot of responsibility, architects are just involved in around 5% of all the buildings worldwide. That's a frightening short little number. And there I have to ask the question, like, did the 95% of people stop listening to us while we were busy talking to ourselves? Do we maybe have a wrong message? Do we have a wrong solution as architects to the world's problems? The building industry is the #1 polluting industry on our planet. So we use the main resources of our planet, and we as architects, we are part of this industry. So how can our generation find maybe a more ecological or sustainable way of living and building our future? Because I think it is important that we ask ourselves those questions. This one I took last week when I was flying into Delhi, but it doesn't matter if that's Delhi, but Beijing, Jakarta, Manila, all of the cities, they look pretty similar when you look from them from the top. Currently 90% of all people on our planet are breathing polluted air. The population of Austria is 8 million. So 7 million people every year are dying because of toxic air. And as architects, and our building industry is a big part of that. And there is this philosophical question, you probably know that when a tree falls down in the forest and nobody hears it, did it make a sound? I think the same is true to that. As architects, we want to build beautiful buildings, but if nobody can see them, are they really there? So I lived for 6 years in Beijing. I know what polluted air can do to your body, how harmful it can be. After 6 years, so 2 years ago, we relocated back to Austria. This is our house, and we currently build up our office next to our house. And we didn't move back to the city in Austria, we didn't move to Vienna or any other city. We also didn't move to any village. We really moved far off the grid. Like to the next village, it's around 50 minutes or so to walk. We have a car, so you can reach it in 10. But it's really far off the grid. And when the weather is beautiful, we do this. So we go hiking, we go skiing, we go ski touring. But if the weather is not good, we finally have some time to work on architecture. And actually, it's a pity that the lecture today is about the architecture part of my life, because the lecture about this topic would have been much more interesting. I get sometimes the question why we moved to the countryside and far away from the city, because all the opportunities, all the talent, and everyone actually wants to move to the city. So why we move further away? And I think usually I always said that, well, I can more focus on my work. We don't get so distracted in the city, so we want to live far away from it. And of course that's true, but I also think that this is a bit of a superficial answer in a way. I think the real reason goes a little bit deeper, and I try to somehow explain it during this lecture now. It all starts with my dad. My father was not just a good carpenter, but he also was a crazy climber. He was a free climber, so that means that he's without any rope, without any security on the mountain, just him and the mountain. And this is a very different kind of way to experience our environment, a very three-dimensional way. My dad, he fell off the mountain 3 years ago and died. And since then, this was actually the main reason then why we moved back to the countryside, to be also close to my mom and to my family. But the more I go myself to the mountain, the more I actually get to know my father in a way. And the more I get to know his purpose, why he went to the mountain, why he was actually addicted to go to the mountain. And I discovered that the purpose that my father had to go climbing is actually the same purpose I have to be an architect. And before I said that architecture is really personal, that actually the way you grow up, the way where you grow up is shaping your personality, and the personality is shaping the projects you're working on. So I somehow get a little bit into this, the reasons or the purpose for my father to be a climber, and also my purpose to do the work or create the work that we are doing. And they somehow go hand in hand. So the first purpose of my dad was to change perspective, to have a really different perspective of our environment. I think when you are in the mountain, you are surrounded by millions of years of evolution. All of this one was created over millions of years, so you somehow seem very insignificant as a human being. And that is sometimes very important to get this change of perspective, that we are not this species that dominates everything else, but that you are a small part of some much greater story. And I believe that architecture can do something similar. When Napoleon stand the first time in front of the pyramids, he also said, now 4,000 years are looking upon us. And I think architecture can be this transmitter of history, can be this transmitter of culture, of identity, and can also provide a little bit of a different perspective. And in a time like we are living, where everything is so immediate, that we can have everything immediately, a change of perspective, a change or a look towards the past sometimes is very helpful, to have a sense of history of where we came from. For that I did a little cosmic calendar where I put together all the history of our universe, so 13.7 billion of years, stretched or zoomed into 1 calendar years. So starting with the Big Bang, and then today's lecture in Istanbul, somehow equally important dates probably. So when you take a look at the cosmic calendar, so 4.5 billion years ago, so that's September 2nd, our solar system forms. And then it took until the December 20th, when the first plants occurred, so the first trees. In the morning of the 31st, at 6 o'clock, the first apes came to life. Our species, Homo sapiens, are 7.5 minutes old. The agricultural revolution was also the start of architecture, because we settled down the first time and we built the first time permanent structures, is 28 seconds ago. 2 seconds ago, the discovery of America. 1 second ago, the Industrial Revolution. And, well, the most important part, probably the first millennial was born 0.08 seconds ago. And I think that when we look back at this history and how insignificant we are actually in this whole timeline of life, I think this really changes how we can look at things, and how problematic it is when we live so much in the past that we dig up all those resources of oil, for example, which was millions of years underneath our earth, to just use everything in the present time. So I think as architects, we have to ask what we can do in our generation. So our generation has approximately 50 years time to change course, to make maybe architecture a bit more sustainable or a bit more ecological. So that's approximately 1/10 of a second. That's a bit scary, but at the same time it is very exciting that it is on us how we are shaping this next 1/10 of a second. The second part is like why the purpose for my dad to go to the mountain, and the purpose for me as well to be an architect, is to find reality. When my dad died, then a lot of people actually came to me and they said, well, during his life, your dad managed to somehow create his own reality far away from the city, far away from our reality. He created his own universe, his own world up there in the mountains. And this might be true, but the more I go myself to the mountain, I think there's nothing more real, objectively real, than being connected to your emotions, connected to your fears, to your joys, and being connected to your senses. Yuval Noah Harari wrote in his books *Sapiens* and *Homo Deus* and 21 Lessons* that mankind, so our species, they really are the dominant species because we could invent fictional stories. So we could invent stories that really shaped all of our lives. Stories like, for example, money. Money is not an objective reality. Like if you would, like a piece of a dollar note is just a useless piece of paper for my cat, for example. It doesn't know what to do with it. So money just exists because we all agree that it exists, and we all trust that it exists, but actually it's not an objective reality. And far too often we have to put, because of this economic growth, we have to put on everything a price tag, but not everything can be measured in this fictional story of the economy, for example. So for example, air or trees. But in this system, air or trees, they don't have the same value, and far too often we forget that. Or another fictional stories are, for example, religions or nations or borders. And far too often we forget that all of our differences and all of our borders are actually just stories in our heads. So for myself, I really think that my dad, he was as close to an objective reality as somehow possible, because this one is really where you are connected to yourself, just you and your mountain being in the present. And with architecture, it's somehow similar. We build since centuries. We build for fictional stories. Like we build, for example, the pyramids for gods. We built churches and mosques for religions. We built castles for governments. And now we mainly build for an economic system, that a developer can make more money with the stuff we are building. And of course, all those fictional stories are very important for us. They are very important for our achievements as human beings. We care about those fictional stories, but our planet doesn't. And the more we are based, or our lives is based in those fictional stories, the less we can care about objective reality like our environment, like our health of our biosphere, like other species, etc. And the third part, why my dad went a lot to the mountains and why the purpose, why I'm an architect, is to really connect to our senses. My dad always said that he really feels alive when he is on a mountain. And I think what he meant by that was that he is truly connected to his senses, that he lives in the present. Because when you're up in the mountain and you're not fully aware what you're doing, when your mind starts to wander, a lot of dangerous things can happen. So you're fully in the present. But I think that our cities these days, they are somehow designed that they keep nature out, that they keep also, that they disconnect us also from our senses, that we can smell something, that we can taste something, that we can feel something. But I think that all of our DNA, it still comes from our ancestors. It still comes from hunter-gatherers. For 10,000s of years, our DNA was shaped the way it is at the moment. And since a cosmic second, we now are disconnected from it. So I think we really miss this, to be really connected to nature on one hand, but also be connected to our senses. And I think that this is also a task of future architects to reconnect people or reconnect nature into our cities, because this one cannot be the way how we introduce nature back to our cities. So I think all those three parts, those three parts, like being disconnected from a wider perspective, being disconnected from an objective reality, and disconnected from our senses, are a big cause for the main problem or the main task what we have, reverse global warming. So I think climate change is a direct outcome of this, to being really disconnected from it. It is really on us, future generation of architects, of how we really want to shape this next tenth of a second. Because the good news is that nobody really knows how architecture looks like in the future and what the building industry really is. So there are a lot of problems with the building industry, but the good thing is that there is on us to find a lot of solutions for that. So that the second part now of my lecture is more of how we, as an office, how our work is somehow answering those problems I was mentioning in the first part. So we try a lot to build green buildings. So this one are the hands of the grandfather of my wife, Fei. He's a bamboo craftsman in the south of China. He's weaving baskets. And when I was the first time with Fei in China, I was directly introduced to this material of bamboo. And since then I'm fascinated with this material. Because it can grow up to 1.4 meters per day. So it grows immediately, very fast. It just takes 3 to 5 years until you can use it for construction, comparable to trees, what takes around 70 to 120 years until you can use the wood of trees. And it has enormous structural capabilities. And this project I'm going to introduce is called One with the Birds. It was inspired by this methodology of tipi tents, that you create architecture that you can build up, but if you don't need it anymore, you can tear it down, and take it with you. And the architecture itself, it doesn't leave any harm on the material, and it doesn't also leave any harm on the site you build it on. And this is our version then of the tipi tent, of this one with the bird structure. So the whole project somehow was designed to reconnect people with our natural environment. To build something very natural in a natural environment where people can sleep and enjoy nature. And I think we had this direct connection with our environment when we were kids. We were climbing trees, we enjoyed the view outside, we were somehow one with the birds. But I think we lost this. When we get older, we more or less are just on a two-dimensional way going through our forest, maybe picking up some mushrooms. But I think that the most beautiful part is when you're fully involved in your natural environment, really enjoying the view from above. For that reason, we designed a modular system out of bamboo. So this one is a self-initiated project, so there was no client, there was nothing. We just thought we want to do something with bamboo. So we bought a lot of bamboo canes, we got them delivered to the office, and then we built some structures. And then we ordered a bit more bamboo, like 700 canes. We paid everything by ourselves, we built everything by ourselves. So all those people you see here, they're all part of our office. In order to get a bit better knowledge of how bamboo works, how the structure of bamboo works, and how we can then adapt this modular system to have it maybe for a wider market. So this pavilion didn't use any metal. So all the joints, they were weaved together. So all materials you can reuse afterwards. And after this test, we created some kind of product designs. I really say product design and not architecture to this, because I love the business model that product designers have, and I hate the business model that architects have. Architects, we actually design uniqueness. Most of the time we design a prototype of a building, and this is a unique building and we never use it again. Because we are really in the business of uniqueness. But this is a really stupid business model compared to a product designer who designs a really beautiful chair and then can sell it maybe 100 or 1,000 times and have a much wider impact with this beautiful chair. So I also see this one a bit more like a product design. So there are smaller sheds and then bigger ones, but we all work with the similar system of bamboo. Of how to build it up. And each of them, they are exactly the same joint. So if you teach a local group how to build one joint, they can extend their structure based on their needs and on their demands. After we published it, we got a couple of people who were interested in building some. So now we have two under construction, one in Ecuador and one in China. The one in Ecuador is a little surf village. We sent two of our team members there who teach the community how to build it up, and then it was really a community effort to build up the structures of bamboo. This one is the first one standing there. This one is in the south of China. The next one coming up. But the wider idea is, because bamboo is such a great resource, a natural resource, and it grows so fast, so you can actually plant a whole bamboo forest or grove. And whenever you take out one bamboo cane, you have to plant two more bamboos in. So in a way, then the natural surrounding of the development grows, but also the development itself can grow. So I'm not saying necessarily that in the future we all have to live in bamboo sheds, but I think it is also our task to think about some ecological alternatives, what we could offer for a bit more ecological living in the cities. A second part of our office is to build authentic buildings. I think probably some of you know this city, but actually this one is every city. Like at the moment, every city looks the same. Like this one is Toronto, and it's really interesting that the only really distinguishing thing in there is this needle, the TV tower, and this one is not necessarily an architecture project. This one was not designed by architects. It was back then an infrastructure project. And the rest is really purely, you can see a little bit Mies van der Rohe on the left side. But it is really built as an international style, and we see that everywhere now. It doesn't matter if it's in the north or if it's in the south. Our cities are really full with concrete frames with a curtain wall facade. And it makes them really look all the same. So there is no much difference anymore between the cities. The cities or architecture in this sense doesn't shape necessarily identity anymore. This one is in Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv you still can see a lot of beautiful buildings, cultural buildings. So you have the Mediterranean style in a way, but also the Bauhaus style. And we are building a residential building which somehow combines those two things. So it combines the maybe building intelligence of the Mediterranean style with arches, and that the main life in Tel Aviv is actually happening outside on big balconies, but also that there is no direct sunlight then going to the glass facades. But also you have this haptic style, what also these cultural buildings have. Another authentic or building that's more in this cultural sense of a building is Beijing. There we designed two buildings next to each other. One is a gallery, the Hong Kong Museum of Fine Arts, and the other one is a lecture hall. So left is the gallery, and on the right side is the lecture hall. The gallery, like the cave itself, were our first apartments, but they were also our first museums. They were the first transmitter of art in a way, and the structural interpretation of the cave is the arch. So we used the arch in this project to form the entrance part of this gallery, to really guide people into, like with the continuing ribbon into the space, and this ribbon then guides them into the exhibition halls. The right part, the lecture hall, it was a bit inspired by art itself. Like you're not looking at art, but you are in an art piece by itself. It's a much smaller space, but we also wanted to have the same design language than on the other side. So we also used the arch and the counter arch as a symbol, and combined it with mirrors. So somehow, if you're sitting there in this lecture to listen to some artist talking about his art piece, you somehow reflect yourself to infinity. And maybe infinity is this place where creativity comes from and all your ideas come from. Another building that somehow adapts to its surrounding is this hotel we recently finished in Beijing. We used there as a brick facade. We used, probably some of you have already been in Beijing, the traditional buildings in Beijing are called courtyards or hutong areas. But one after the other now is getting demolished to make space for concrete frames with curtain walls. And we used the old bricks from those hutong areas in order to construct the facade of this building. In the interior, it's also a little bit like you sneak around alleys, like you walk through a hutong area. It's right at the edge of one of those very famous hutong areas in Beijing, and actually the Galaxy Soul is from Shanghai, is right next to it. And another project in China is the snow apartment. That's also me there. I built a lot of igloos with my dad when I was young, and I heard it snowed here, but it probably didn't have enough snow for building igloos. We had this winter enough snow to build, like, I could have built my house in an igloo this winter. The snow apartment was somehow, it's next to the ski slopes in Beijing. So Beijing has the Winter Olympic Games 2022. A bit in the north of Beijing, there's a city called Zhangjiakou. There all the skiing competitions are, and it's quite a famous skiing area. I mean, it's not comparable to Austrian skiing areas, but it's not bad to ski there. Yeah, this one is right next to the slopes, and it's like a guest house for the client. When he goes there skiing with his friends for one weekend, and he can then sleep there are 7 bedrooms in there, and he can sleep then with his friends for one weekend and have this whole winter experience. So during the day you go skiing, but also during the whole weekend you somehow live in your igloo and in your snow caves. But when you actually touch those walls, they are very warm. There are heating pipes going behind the walls. And another bit more cultural project, or project that adapts to a certain thing, is the Olympic Games bridge in Beijing. We didn't win this one, so this one is for the archives. But we used somehow we worked with Aero together with the structural engineers to somehow form out of the Olympic symbol the structural model for this bridge. So from the side, it somehow looks like the 3 mountains. So it's called Sunshine Bridge from the side. From the top, it is a bit like a DNA string, which also somehow has something to do with the Olympic Games when you think about doping, and maybe there is something there. And from the front, it's like a circle. The circle, if you know Chinese gardens, the entrance gate is always like a circle. It's a welcoming gesture in Chinese tradition. So the more you go then towards the bridge, the more it opens up to you, and then when you drive through, it somehow takes you into the Olympic Games area. A third part that somehow defines our office, or the work of our office, is flexibility. I think that also is a topic that defines actually our generation. I think that our generation is much more flexible than, for example, the generation of our parents. Were much more flexible than their parents, and so forth. So flexibility is something that increases. Our world is getting smaller. So for me, it was very easy to go to China and open up an architectural studio. For my dad, it would have, well, probably my dad would have also been able to somehow do it. But the generation of my dad, there were probably less opportunities to do something like this. So I think that we get much more flexible, but our industry, architecture itself, is very rigid. It is very massive. Well, we build buildings, but maybe for example, the renting areas are getting more and more expensive in the cities. We need to rethink that architecture maybe can take on different tasks than just one. So for example, on the left side, this one is for Volkswagen, a think tank. So they came to us and said, sorry, I always want to walk a little bit around the stage. It feels very weird to stand the whole time still. But sometimes I hit against this board here. So they wanted to have a think tank, but at the same time they also wanted to have meeting spaces or a big area where they can introduce their new polluting car or something. So they wanted to have a lot of different tasks within one space, and we wanted to provide them a design that can take on all these parts. So on the right side, you see a project that is a live house, like a concert hall. On the right side there is a bar, on the left side there is a little restaurant. So you can combine the whole space for a bigger space, or you can shield it up and have 3 separate functions. And to also bring this idea a little bit towards the city, that your building is not just this rigid thing that you have to use, but also that the building is using its surrounding and it's adapting to its surrounding. So for example, when it can be like a backstage for a music festival, or it can be used for public viewing when when Germany is losing in the World Cup against Turkey or so. So it can take on a lot of different public functions depending on the needs and the life of its surrounding. And during winter it can completely close off the neighboring park, for example. A more a project that this was actually our first project I think we ever did, but second one, and we collected there with an initiative of Cola, and like Cola went to universities and they say, well, we need to reduce plastic waste as kind of, I think, kind of a marketing gag for them. Well, at least they got then 17,000 cola bottles, and they asked us then to design a cola bowl with sculpture, so making somehow treasure out of trash. I don't know if, like, whoever has been to Beijing, you also know this image that after the busy hours at 6 o'clock or so, then all those public plazas they transfer into a public dance arena. So this is, I think, the only way I really still could see communism play out. It is a really beautiful image, those people all dancing together. I would have a music there as well, but never mind. But in any case, we designed a gate for these people, or for that people are that people get active. So somehow that architecture makes you want to move. So the more there are sensors, there are 700 fins in different heights, so from 2 meters to 12 meters is the highest one, and they all have LEDs in the upper part of the fins, and there are sensors around this plaza, and the more people dance, the brighter the whole sculpture gets. Oh, back to the Colombo, sorry, this was messed up. I wanted to bring this one in at the this Cola thing because as a student I was taught in all those 3D softwares, I was taught in scripting, and I was totally addicted to it. And I tried every project to do as little as possible outside of the computer and as much as possible within the computer. So we wanted to design this kind of a paper roll, right? Which is now I think it's pretty easy to do. Back then I think I struggled for 4 days or so how to do it, how to bend paper in a script, and then. Like my wife came to me and said, well, you know what would be an easy solution? How about we just build a model? And well, then we did the model. The next day they built the structure, and then we hanged the whole thing on it. And it took 3 days from the paper model to build it, and it took me 4 days to fade. So even if you have somehow the best tools, you know, there are still ways of maybe how to be smart in your whole process. So even though the computer can do a lot of things that are perfect, but sometimes architecture is defined by imperfection, and it's very difficult to create imperfection with the computer. So somehow this messy kind of process also makes sense, and this project taught me actually a lot. And I think the last participatory project, in a way, or flexible project, not my last topic, but the last one in this topic, is the Dubai Pavilion for 2020 in Austria. And we wanted to bring this freshness that Austria always tries in those expos to present themselves as this tech country, and a lot of advanced is made in Austria. And so this is all not true. But what Austria is really, really good at is refreshment. Like, Austria is a really fresh country. We value our landscapes, we value our mountains, we value our water, and we wanted to bring this sense of that. That even you are now in Dubai, you know, when you come to Austria, you can get refreshed. It's probably the least efficient building there is. So it drops water, it leaks, but all those fins then transport water onto its top and then make it rain in the pavilion. And this is maybe also a forthcoming refreshment in the desert and of Dubai. My last topic is actually the one closest to our hearts, what we do in our office. One reason was, of course, the death of my dad that we moved back, but another reason was also to create a little bit more balance in our life. I was pretty overworked in Beijing. I think a lot of you also know that architecture is not the most healthy profession you can have. I sometimes say that I think architects, they mainly wear black, not of a minimalistic fashion statement, but more of an emotional statement. I think we are all very, very sad inside. And therefore we want to express this with black dressing. But I found that there is nothing more important for myself to create balance in my life. I am a Libra. I don't believe in any zodiac sign or any horoscope or so, but balance is something very important for me. And this is true in my life, that we have a good work-life balance now, with going to the mountain and doing a little bit architecture. But it's also true how we work on projects. So 90% of the time we work on 2 projects, not more and not less. One of the projects is paid and the other one is not paid. The paid project is paying for all the salaries and to keep us afloat. And the other one is something we self-initiate. So I showed you one project already, the bamboo thing. This was self-initiated because we believed in a vision to create something and trusted that maybe at the end of those 1.5, 2 years or so of research, we might find a client who maybe wants to build it. So on one hand, our office is always split with projects that have responsibility, that are shaped by cooperation with the client, that have a brief, that have a lot of conversation, and that somehow also lives with a certain balance, what he says and what we want to do. And so the other one is true free creation, something where we believe in a vision and we want to make this vision somehow possible. And I found that this also creates a lot of good motivation within our office. I think for the people that is also really important that this passion that we have as students is not dying once we are entering the job market. I don't want to discourage you now, but a lot of, when I think back, the most passionate time I had as an architect were still my student years. Although the years I had since I was a student, those 5 years, they were really good to me, and it was a lot of fun, so creating something by myself, but never as free as being a student. And somehow to get this mentality of a student also again into our work is by balancing those 2 kind of projects. And some of those projects within this topic, vital, healthy buildings, are based on those self-initiated projects. So yeah, we moved to the mountains of Austria, I said that already, but we are also growing our own food now, as good as it gets. Now it's February, so we still eat potatoes, we still eat broccoli and salads, and so what we harvested in autumn. So we try to be as self-sufficient with our food as somehow possible. We get the eggs from the neighbor. In spring now we get some chickens as well. We get meat from the neighbor. So we try to go as less to the supermarket as somehow possible. But there's architecture is personal, and your lifestyle is also creating the projects that you're building. So we try to do also a lot of those kind of vital projects that are not just for human beings, but also give back some space to nature itself. This cafe, for example, we did with plants that can detoxify the air. those plants then grow in, this is a space in Beijing, they use this structural grid in order to get taller. And while they get taller, they can detoxify the air, and you can drink a coffee without a breathing mask, for example. We also got involved in a project from a friend of us, from Niklas Weise, who has a rope manufacturing at home, and he seeds ropes. He weaves seeds into the ropes, and then after some time it grows, and you can create like vertical gardens with it, with the least amount of water you can possibly imagine. So all those ropes, they just hang into the water, and you can grow from tomatoes to salads to aubergine. Like you can create, you can grow a lot of different things. So, for example, those salads, these are all grown by this method. So we try to get to surround ourselves also with people who like to create projects with food and with architecture. This one is for a couple who wanted to move to Germany, a very small plot, so they didn't have enough space on the plot to grow their own food, but they wanted to live self-sufficient, so we gave the space back to the plants and to a garden on the roof. So really like a sensible house, a house you can smell, a house you can feel, a house you can eat in a way. There is a lot of similarities between food and architecture. Before I actually showed this slide that with the agricultural revolution 28 seconds ago, it was the first part of settlements, of permanent settlements. That means that agriculture, the first part where we stopped being hunters and gatherers and we domesticated our land in order to grow food, was also the first part our cities started to grow. So we discovered that the crop is strong enough to support more people. And our cities grew like that. But our cities were always interconnected between food, agriculture on one hand, and architecture on the other hand. So this one has, for example, city walls. In between is all agriculture, and then there is the city of Ur in Mesopotamia. Now I think Iraq, right? And there's a temple then in the middle, and those crops who were not given to the gods were then distributed to the people. So it was always a yin and yang of agriculture and architecture. But that changed. That also, like all the cities we still know, for sure, also Istanbul, London, New York, they were all shaped by food. When you look at street names, for example, they were all named after where special food, for example, was coming from. And all the people who ate on the street, for example, or at home, they really had an idea where the food came from, and they ate locally grown food. That then changed with the Industrial Revolution, with the invention of railways and refrigeration. With those two things, you suddenly can grow far outside of people's sight and people's minds. You can grow food and then just transport it to the cities and then refrigerate it, and it can last longer. So with that, somehow all of our food we pushed outside, and we were not part of this of the process of growing our own food. We were not part of the food production anymore. And with new technology, of course, food became a really big business. At the moment, 90% of all of our food belongs to 5 corporations. And some of those corporations are chemical corporations, like for example Monsanto. Bayer is a big player. So all of these multinational corporations, they own our food. But food and architecture, food and shelter, they are both human needs. They are human rights. But we give everything to those companies and are basically in the hands of these companies, because just they can deliver this system of growing something very far outside and then distribute it to the cities. And this has, of course, a lot of ecological problems. For example, the agricultural industry uses 70% of all of our drinking water. They also produce 1/3 of all greenhouse gases, so more than transportation, for example. And it's also a big threat to biodiversity, because we mainly grow food for our food. We mainly grow crops in order to feed it to our cows, to make them fatter faster, and that we are satisfying them than our consumption of meat, for example. So all of this one created a very unhealthy industry in a way. It's also unhealthy to us because we are so disconnected of what we eat and where it comes from. Obesity, diabetes are in an all-time high, for example. So the agricultural system is very harmful in a way and very insufficient on another. But the same is somehow true to architecture. I said already before that architecture is a very unsustainable, the building industry is very unsustainable in itself. And we mainly, with the invention, with the thing that agriculture moved outside of our cities, we had a lot of space to grow our cities. Like our cities then didn't have borders anymore that were defined by agriculture. We could grow wherever we wanted. And we grew also to the vertical and far away actually from the soil that once fed us. And this created a lot of islands in the cities. If you look at our cities, if you look at the towers in the cities, they are very disconnected from urban life itself. So the only connection between a tower and the city is basically that stops at the doorman. Kimball Musk said food is the new internet, and this is really true because in the next 35 years, more food will be consumed in the last 10,000 years. And if we want to eat healthier, and if we want to eat healthier food, the only option is that we bring the growth of our food further towards our cities, so that the cities become part of growing our food, to eat local. And this is a very hard thing to do, but at the same time it also creates a lot of opportunities for architecture, because we have both very harmful industries on our hands, but maybe by combining themselves, both can benefit from them. So we created a modular system for this project, very, very modular, just a couple of systems, and these ones then can be attached to different structures. So again, this one is a self-initiated project. There was never a client. We still don't have a client. We just published it. But this one was at first a response to the refugee crisis in Austria. In Austria, the refugees from Syria came in, and they were not allowed from the government to work and earn some money. So actually, there was nothing for them really to do. But if they can feed themselves with architecture, maybe that's the first interaction then to the community, and to maybe sell food, maybe grow food together, and so forth. But of course, because it is a modular system, this one can grow. So it can grow in different sizes. It can grow in different structures. But always a yin and yang of living spaces within the triangle, and in the V-shape growing the vegetables. And really interesting it gets then when this whole system then moves into the city, because as I said before, the only way to really eat healthy is if our agriculture moves closer where we can see it. So here you somehow have your personal farms then in next door. So you have like an apartment which is somehow a house with a garden but with a view. Yeah, and somehow it's an example of how architecture can help to grow local food. And governments basically agree with that. Food security for our cities is one of the biggest topics. When you, for example, go to Davos, food security is one of the biggest topics. And governments, they agree, they support now a lot of farmers markets, they support food initiatives, food education, and markets also agree. If you see at our supermarkets, I don't know how it is in Turkey, but in Austria, for example, the organic food section is growing, while, for example, microwaves and refrigerated foods and frozen food, their sales are plummeting. So markets are also agreeing on it. And it somehow makes sense to plant on vertical farms, because in an indoor area you can have a much better, you can create a much better climate, for example, for growing vegetables than outside. You can protect your food from varying weathers and conditions. And the whole project also is a kind of it starts, or every system has byproducts. So for example, the city creates already a lot of heat, but there are some vegetables like beans, nuts, tomatoes, potatoes who need heat in order to grow. So we can reuse, for example, the energy we would usually pump out of our buildings to grow certain kinds of vegetables and herbs. And also a green layer somehow protects also the indoor area. So you have a natural cooling throughout your building. And the project somehow is in itself an organic loop of food production. So you grow food, you have a root cellar, you treat waste to compost, and then use this earth again to regrow food. And the food you grow upstairs you can then either give out to a community or sell at the farmer's market. But this one is a building that is not just an island in the city, but maybe has a more direct connection to its surrounding. And most importantly is that this process of growing food, it comes back into the center of our cities, and with that it also comes back to the centers of our minds. Because if we care where our food is coming from and where it is grown and that we eat local, I think then we care also more about the dishes that are on our tables. So I think that like reversing climate change, pollution, growing food, fresh water, artificial intelligence, technological disruption, those are all topics that entered the architectural tasks, that enters what architects need to take care of. I think architecture is no longer about forms or styles or about architectural theories. I think that the responsibilities that we have as architects, I think, are greater than that. I think that there are much more tasks now coming into architecture, but that also opens then an opportunity for us to maybe reach out to more people than just the 5% of who are we building for at the moment. Because in the end, I think architecture should be about creating buildings that connect to our senses. So, for example, creating with haptic materials you want to touch and look at. With vegetables you can smell. With herbs that their scent is in your nose. But also architecture you can hear because bees and birds are nesting in your buildings. And maybe also architecture you can eat. But in the end, it is our task as architects to create a reality for our grandkids where they still can live, breathe, eat, and drink. So this building somehow connects to that. So I think that our generation is not necessarily driven by money. It is also not necessarily driven by to make a career or being famous or something like this. I think we are a very idealistic generation, but idealistic that we want to create an impact with our projects, that we want to work on projects that have a meaning. And that is sometimes that seems very difficult in architecture, because architecture seems like this rigid system that seems a little bit like an unbreakable system for a young generation. And I know that I felt like this when I was a student. I still feel a little bit like this. And to you guys who feel probably the same than me, I want to share a little story. Sorry, just a little story that when I was a toddler, a real toddler, like 3-4 years, my parents gave me a book, and it was kind of a zoom-out book. So it was the first page, there was a triangular shape. And then on the second page you saw that this triangular shape was the column of a rooster, and on the next page it zoomed out one more steps and you saw two children who were looking at the rooster, and the next page you saw that this one was a magazine lying on the table, so it zoomed out on every step. And this last step, the last page, then you saw the world from the moon's perspective. And this is somehow the perspective I think a lot of us have about architecture, that we see architecture as this grand thing that combines all this history of builders and of creative people into one craft, and we don't know where our place is, and we feel a little bit overwhelmed and anxious about that. But I think that in recent years architecture changed a lot. I think this book of architecture, a lot of new industries came inside. So, for example, you don't necessarily need to study architecture anymore to be an architect, and you don't need to do architecture even you studied architecture. So you can be a jewelry designer, for example, but there are a lot of different crafts coming into architecture, and you can be creative in your own way. And there are so many pages then added to this book, and every one of us then can find their own little niche and their own little page in this book. And when our impact that we have on this one page is big enough, that maybe then can change the whole image we have of architecture. Because if we look at our planet, we don't see like these fictional stories like religions or nations or money or the economic system or growing all the time. We see reality. We see land, we see water, we see air, we see trees, we see people. And I think our generation's challenge and our generation's task is somehow to protect this reality as good as it gets. Thank you. If someone has a question, I'm here. Yes.
So somebody's asking, maybe.
No, if nobody's asking, it either means that everything is so clear or that everybody is happy that it's finally over.
I think it was very clear, the message that you were giving to all the young architects. Actually, it's very nice to have you here to discuss all these issues, because as a law school, we have started a discussion about how actually we should teach architecture in this all the changing movement. So you actually pointed out your generation challenges. The challenges that you take as generation, that education doesn't take the challenges yet, the architectural education. So I would like to, as a young new fresh architect, as a 5 years architect you mentioned about yourself, how would you think that architectural education will transform in the future, in the near future?
Difficult one, but I would say get rid of all grades. No tests anymore. I think architecture needs to be much more practical. And not just in the building sense. I mean that also, yes, build more with your hands, make projects with your hands and so, but also practical when it comes maybe to communication or so. You know, when I don't know how it is at your university, but when I went to university, I surrounded myself with just architects. My friends were all architects. I lost all other connections, and I just hang out with architects. And then when you're at university, you present your projects to architects at the final crits. Then there are coming other architects, so you somehow build up this archi language. This is really in the Urban Dictionary, this archi language, and somehow you just learn how to talk to other architects. But other architects won't ever be your clients. and I needed to learn this the very hard way. So I think that maybe at the end crits don't invite other architects to crit the projects of the students, but invite all the parents. Because I think the communication really changes. If you present something to a non-architect, then presenting something to an architect. I think that all of this intellectual architectural theories and so that was so important to somehow shape styles and forms and eras in the past, I think these ones will get less important in the future. And I hope that we somehow connect a little bit more outside of our own industries to do cooperations than just within ourselves.
You said that architecture is like, you show the cityscape, and you said that it is same everywhere, like we have the city everywhere. But you also said that you didn't like the economical model the architects has, like the uniqueness that we can sell the same product 1,000 times, we have to make it every time. So I think that's a little bit like contradictory. What do you think about that?
How can we? Yeah. No, absolutely. It is, yes. But I think that what we repeat in our cities is also a very harmful way of building. I think, of course, as an architect, you can design, maybe in your life, if you're really lucky, you design 10 to 12 really beautiful buildings. But the impact you have with those is not necessarily for the people who live in that building, but maybe the impact is more to inspire other people to do something great as well. But I think that as architects, if we design something really ecological, a new way of building, for example with CLT, new materials and so, these we need to extend our cities. There's no way around it. A lot of people will move into our cities, and in the future we will be a much larger population. So of course we need to build a lot, and most of it will need to be economical as well, but as well as ecological. So I see the contradiction within that, but I think that we can repeat certain things if they work very well. But I think this business of trying to reinvent everything in every project, I think puts also so much competition within ourselves. Like when, for example, Bjarke is putting out a new project, like the first comment underneath is, oh, that looks like this, or oh, he did the same thing over there. Yeah. But like that's his style, and it works very well for a lot of people. So I think this competitive behavior that comes with needing to being unique all the time is also very self-destructive for our profession.
Thanks for this great lecture. I'm really impressed, actually. And it's very important to discuss architecture as a social act today, since we're in this age of post-truth and we're still discussing if climate change is a fact rather than focusing on how we're destroying the planet and all. About these iterative or generative, I don't know what you'd like to call them, systems based on a model, I usually am quite hesitant as the architect usually describes them as a way to justify a beautified object in the end. But with your presentation you went to the other direction, which was really beautiful and focused on the material, the nature, and etc. I just have this question, do you think can we rely on the generic all the time, no matter what? Because obviously you need the potato and the egg and the broccoli, and I also need them too, but probably what we do them is quite different. And maybe that falls into the category of the fictional, I think, in your description. so the culture, short and short. So I'm wondering, what do you think about that? I mean, is it really possible to rely on the generic in agriculture?
No, I don't think so. Also, I think I said that like part of it is for like one project we always do is for a client. The other one is more for a vision. So we do more this generic projects, the more system-based projects for ourselves. So to creating a vision that can be multiplied maybe in future. But of course, a project for a client has much different brief, right? Like he comes with something that might not work in a generic manner. But maybe we also can then use some parts we did for these other projects, some research parts, some experiment that maybe also played in a role for the other projects, for the egg, for example. So I think it always goes hand in hand. If you just work on generic things, maybe also it becomes a little bit boring after some time. So sometimes, architecture, it needs to correspond to certain climates. It needs to correspond sometimes to certain cultures, to a certain identity. So it gets shaped by a lot of compromises in the end. And I think that is also very important then to learn as a studio. I think we somehow try to balance this out with the kind of projects we're going to take in.
Yeah, so you just mentioned that you always have two projects in your office, one which is for a client and the other one which is more a free project. The question of me would be how do you manage to have this both parallel, not parallel, but how you manage, because it sounds like that you give as much attention to the free project as you give to the project with the client. For what I experienced from my internships is they have some free project, but it's usually like a big company with 30 employees. They share one project. And I, as a student, was the only one who was really working on this, and the others just had a quick look over it and say, "Oh, you could maybe do this." So, how you do it? Like,
you answered your questions yourself already. Like the other studios, they are big, and there is a lot of freedom in being small. Like we are maybe 4, maybe sometimes 5 people, including my wife and me. So we really try very hard to stay as small as possible, because then your whole backpack of responsibilities and things that you have to say yes to gets much smaller. So for example, I now, like the biggest freedom I ever had for myself was saying no to projects. This really created a whole different way of working, because suddenly I can then choose, okay, for the next 6 months or so, I take on this project. But the research projects, they spread out, like this farm tower, we worked now 2.5 years on it, for example. Like it spreads out for a long time. And sometimes, we do for 6 months or so work on a self-initiated project, and then we keep it on hold, wait until the next stage kicks in, the publications, for example. Now we probably need to wait for half a year, and then we take it on again. But mainly how we do it, or how we manage this, is by staying small.
Hey, so my question was about the farm tower. In the farm tower, the problem is that people are farming and living at the same time. So while farming, we get crops. So my question is, what was your, how do you do the pollination and the balance between insects and where they go inside? You will live over there, because mostly in crops, most pollination is done by insects, so that would be a big problem if we don't have insects, because That would be in the middle of the city, and since we have all those pesticides in the city, would it be hard to pollinize entire town?
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of farming in the city, right? One is hydroponics, for example, so doing it without soil. The other way is, for example, in this tower we have a root cellar where we grow already the seeds. So there, and then the seeds get planted in, for example. So this one gets treated in the basement and then gets onto the farms, for example. So this is a whole cycle of agriculture in a way.
I have a really easy question. You said that in the beginning of the lecture, the efforts are for months. You think, did they help to find a client for you? Or
What was it? Sorry.
you said that the efforts are for months. Your month. So did they help to find a client for you?
Yeah, I mean, if I would say no, I probably would lie. Of course, it is like for a bit of marketing, and also it is also maybe not harmful, right, to have awards, because in a fast-moving time like we are, it creates a little bit of buzz and it creates some media also. But it's the same thing, you know. Does Instagram help to get clients? I don't necessarily. Maybe it is like a little bit like a dating app, right? Like you get to know a lot of people, but in the end it turns out that most are swiping left. So yeah, it might help in a little bit, you know, to get to know people, but trust for a project forms much differently. Like trust doesn't form through some award you once won. Trust also doesn't form with emails or so. It forms over a period of time, talking, sharing a vision, and so forth. So maybe for getting to know each other, it's not bad. Some awards, but actually, you know, it was also more about what does it mean to me personally, right? Winning an award, and it doesn't do anything because it's not an objective thing. An award. I used to do ski jumping, so professionally until I was 19, and then I changed to architecture. So I sat down in front of the computer and I didn't get up. But ski jumping is something very different, right? It's very subjective, very objective, right? If you jump 125 meters and your competitors jump 120 meters, you're gonna win, right? Because you jump further. But in architecture, that is not an objective thing. It's very subjective, based on some juror's opinion. So personally, it doesn't mean really a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. If someone else has then a question, you can also reach me through Instagram or write me a mail. So I usually respond to questions.
Hi. My question is, do you think the current student workload is necessary for architectural education?
The what, sorry?
The current student load, I mean, do you think they have to learn to be an architect? And what would you change in a student life?
So I like the best architect I've ever worked with. I didn't have my own studio back then. I worked for Craft, and there was another architect, the Chinese one, didn't speak any English, but was by far the best architect I've ever worked on. Never set foot in an architectural university because his parents didn't have any money. He went to public libraries, got somehow a cracked version of some sort of 3D program, and learned himself everything he knew, and he was fantastic. So based on creativity, I don't know, if education doesn't change in the future, I'm not sure it's 100% necessary. But of course, for a lot of other things, right, you won't get a permission to build, for example. You will never be able to teach, for example. But I think that also students at the moment, they have much more pressure than, for example, I had 5 years, like I graduated 5 years ago. I studied for 9 years, 8 or 9 years, and I was one of the fastest in my class. Like there were people who studied 23 semesters or 24. This was really average, and this created a lot of ways how you can fail in your project, and that was so important because it didn't give you the pressure to make everything right in the first try, right? And now I think you study like 3 years for bachelor and 2 years for masters, right? And that puts a lot of pressure on you that you get everything right. And it also doesn't teach you how to fail properly, because failing is so much more important than actually winning. I said before, I was a ski jumper, and a friend of mine, he won everything. Like every competition he participated, he won since he was 8 until he was 15. And then he came into puberty, a little bit changed, you know, his body changed and so, and then he didn't win. He went second and third and so, and he couldn't know how to handle that, so he quit. He was the talent of a lifetime, but he quit when he was 16. So, you know, like failing is a very important thing to learn, also in architecture. But if you have constantly this time pressure of tests and design studios at the same time and so, it's very hard to do that properly. Okay, thank you guys.
I said it was going to be quite inspirational. Indeed, it was truly inspirational, motivating, and I should say somehow provocative. It was good. Thank you for being with us tonight. I would like to thank you for our audience, and we are continuing to do our lecture series, and the 5th of March we have another international guest which will be announced soon, and we invite all of you again on the 5th of March here at Taşkışla. Thank you.